Hey, welcome to the Scaling Freedom AI podcast, where we cut through the AI hype to deliver only what's truly useful for real business impact. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Dan Barrett to the Scaling Freedom show. Dan is not just the founder of a successful marketing agency, he's also a podcast host of the Dan Barrett Show. He runs a marketing agency, the AdWord Nerds, insightful writer behind betterquestions.co. He's truly multi-talented. I think he'll be able to offer a rare view of someone who doesn't just talk about AI, but someone who actually brings this multi-dimensional perspective to it. So, Dan, let's have some fun.
Thanks so much, man. I appreciate that. I'm down for fun. And that was a great intro. So thank you very much. I was sort of training to be a teacher, a history teacher, sort of at the high school level was where I was focused. And I was doing that basically because I was in bands all through high school and middle school and into college. And if you wanted to be in a band, being a teacher was what you did because you got summered off, and that way you could play around or you could tour or whatever. And so started doing that, and teaching is very difficult. It was emotionally difficult for me in a way that I did not anticipate. I love teaching and I love kids, and I worked basically everything from second grade to high school at some level. He's either as a substitute teacher or a paraprofessional or an actual teacher or whatever. But the thing I wasn't ready for was I didn't know this about myself at the time. I really wanted people to like me. And as a teacher, right, that's a dangerous character trait to have, right? And I've spent my adult life kind of coming to terms with that and getting over it, and sort of having my own kids really helps with that because you've got to parent them and there's no one else to parent them, and you can't just be their friend. You got to be their dad and all that stuff. But at the time, it really put me through the ringer. I was very unprepared for it. So I had started freelancing doing web design, just kind of like WordPress themes and stuff like that, just as a way to make extra money. And about a year into that, I realized I was making more money freelancing than I was teaching. And I was like, all right. So I kind of made the jump into starting my own business. And it's kind of been, it's been that way ever since. We sort of moved into digital marketing. I moved into real estate as our primary focus. And I've been doing that for, almost 15 years now. And then, yeah, over the last couple years, really starting to incorporate AI both into the way we run the agency, the services that we give to clients. I've been doing all sorts of automation stuff, just to make my own life easier. So it's been this kind of very gradual sort of synthesis of things. But I do think that I bring a lot of my teaching background into what I do. I'm very like, there'll be some like Google Ads question, and I'll be like, who had something to say about this? A little guy named Plato. And then I'll like be off talking about some nonsense that like doesn't make any sense to anybody else. But it's like, I love connecting ideas from all these different sort of parts of human culture. And it's been a lot of fun. I will say a lot of fun ever since.
Yeah, I'd love to rewind the tape a little bit back, and I'd love to hear more about the transition between being a teacher to being a musician. Were you doing that at the same time, or was that sort of after the teaching career?
Yeah, I mean, the music stuff has been very, it's been very, I have a very weird musical trajectory. So I was in bands, starting in middle school. So I was doing music before I was a teacher, right? I was a kid playing in bands in high school, going to a lot of shows. I sort of came up in the sort of punk, hardcore, ska scenes. There was a burgeoning kind of live music scene in Connecticut, where I'm from at the time, certain Massachusetts, New Jersey. You have, bands like Lifetime and all these pop punk bands that were sort of coming up at the time. So it was an interesting time for music, and very much a type of music where you're like, well, I could do that. Right. Like if you would go see a band or be kids like 3 years older than you, and you'd be like, that kid smokes. He's the coolest kid I've ever seen in my entire life. I want to do that, and then you'd go start your own band. So I'd been doing that pretty consistently all the way up through college. And that's where I started. I went to UMass Amherst. I was studying to be a teacher and doing my history degree and all that stuff. And at that time, I was in a couple different bands. I was in like a touring kind of melodic hardcore band or whatever. But when I went up to college, I ended up meeting the person who's now my best friend. He was the best man at my wedding, this guy, Tim McCouga, who ended up becoming my songwriting partner. We put together a project that was just us playing acoustic guitars, and we would play coffee houses. We would just be weird. We were like weirdly confrontational. It was just this very bizarre mix of like our personalities, our senses of humor. And so graduated from college. We both started working. My friend Tim is a full-time teacher today and has been ever since, essentially. But we kept playing music together, and we recorded a record just in my room, like in my apartment, right, using a laptop and GarageBand, which was sort of the recording program that Apple came out with at the time, just really, really bare bones stuff. And we just kind of kept that project going as a recorded project. I ended up putting out a record. I made CDRs. I send out like 30 of them or
Yes, CDRs.
Yes, exactly. Like you would go to Kinko's and I've made the stuff and I bought my jewel cases from cdbaby.com or whatever it was, right? You're just doing that kind of thing. This was kind of the MySpace era, right? You would put it on MySpace. And that was kind of it. That was kind of the end of it. Essentially, we would just play music whenever Tim came down to hang out, and we would eat a burrito and we'd play music, whatever. And that was around 2008 that record came out with air quotes, meaning I sent out 30 CDRs and that was about it. But in this very weird twist of fate, the record kind of kept going on the internet and like all these sort of weird iterations. So it got picked up by the 4chan music board and sort of kept alive there for a while. And then, you know, 10 years after that was like the last FM sort of music boards or found that record and liked it, sort of kept it alive. And so even just in the last few years, so I think it was 2 years ago. So this record that came out in 2008, we had a song from that record where it charted on the TikTok top 30 or something. Like it sort of found another life as like a TikTok
Incredible.
song. And so we ended up putting together a live band to play the material from this thing that was never actually a live, it was never a live band. So the live band is like 7 people in it, whereas like the recording was just Tim and I. And it's bizarre, man. Like we'll play, I mean, we're so lucky, but we'll play like sold out shows. The audience is 17. You know what I mean? It's just like truly bizarre, right? It's a truly like it, you couldn't recreate it if you wanted. So I was saying, like, we just got back. We just did our first UK and EU tour,
So cool.
and we played, festivals. We played a bunch of sold out shows, like headline shows. It was an incredible experience, right? But it truly is like not a typical musical career. So it's just kind of been happening in the background as I also do all this other stuff. And I just try to appreciate it. And I'm like, I didn't make it happen and it's going to go away at some point. We'll just enjoy it while we got it. You know what I mean?
Freaking love it. That is such a wonderful story. What year was it when you guys shipped out the 30 or so CDs?
Yeah. So it's like 2008 was the year that we said, okay, this is the thing. So we'll come up on the whatever it's going to be the 20th anniversary in a couple years now. But it was, yeah, man, truly, truly bizarre experience, but truly like, I mean, this is the thing I always come back to, like in my life in particular, so much of my life and the things that make my life interesting or have made me successful, they're direct outgrowths of the internet. Right. It's like most of the stuff that in fact, I'm just go out on a limb and say everything I do, these literally would be impossible or nonsensical without the internet, right? It's like I'm a product of the internet, for better or for worse. And particularly an era of the internet that was like pre-social media, although I do, the TikTok thing has benefited us and everything, but very much a product of the blog era of the internet. And so, AI, speaking of AI is very interesting to me in terms of it's clearly a transformative technology. It's clearly technology that can be used for so many things. But I also see it kind of like eating away at a lot of the corners of the internet that made the internet interesting, right? And I think as we sort of get away from, or if we get away from this kind of view of the internet as a thing where it's like really intense personal connection, these like real niche communities where, for example, like a record like ours, which is not a mainstream record by any means, like not a record that ever would have gotten like a radio play. I mean, the song that got popular on TikTok is the first song on the record. It's like a 10-minute instrumental that we only put first as like a joke because it's like, this is the worst way to open a record. So like, let's do that. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like made to not be popular. But the internet makes things like that possible to find an audience, right? It helps people to find you. So I do worry a little bit about us getting away from that as we get into this kind of era of what I assume will be hyper niche, sort of personalized content. But, I owe most of the things in my professional and creative life to the power that gets unlocked by giving people access to these tools. So I'm beyond interested to see what happens in the next 5, 10 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And just unpacking that a bit more, you're saying that you're somewhat concerned that these pockets or niches of communities that we're able to form organically might go away in an age of AI. Can you talk a little bit more behind kind of your thoughts there? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think it's so the internet clearly went through like multiple eras, right? And those eras are fundamentally defined by the technology that is sort of fueling that period, right? I mean, there's the classic like Marshall McLuhan, like the medium is the message kind of thing, right? The modes of communication, the types of communities that grow out of these technologies are fundamentally products of the nature of the technology itself, right? So you have the super early internet, you have the BBSs, you got to dial into your neighbor's computer and he's got a weird text-based RPG or, that kind of thing, right? The sort of like really early days. Um, and then you kind of got into this first wave of making the internet more consumer facing and more accessible to make things, right? So that's when I was a kid, or not necessarily when I was a kid, but when I really started messing around with the internet was like I had a GeoCities website, right? Like
Yeah.
or it was like the beginning of like Live Journal. Like I remember like the girl I had a crush on had a Live Journal and I like stare at her Live Journal, right? Or like Zanga, all these things, right? Even MySpace, where MySpace is like clearly a precursor to things like
Facebook.
Facebook or whatever. But even MySpace was like, you had kids learn to code so that they could make their MySpace profile look weird because you had a lot of control over the display of your MySpace profile. Yeah, I made it shimmery or I made it animated that looks like the Matrix background in the background, right? So it was this era that really rewarded a lot of hacking kind of behavior in the sense of like, how do you figure it out? Why did I learn HTML? Right. I said at some point I started doing WordPress themes was how do I learn HTML? I learned HTML because I wanted to have a blog and I had to make a blog. There was enough there that it was accessible, but it was also not so polished that it was super easy to do. It was kind of like the ideal difficulty curve for learning how to work with these tools. And you had this kind of golden era of internet blogging where you had like 43 folders and you had all these different kind of blogs coming out where even things like Metafilter, things that were like really, really influential and really exposed me to a lot of different stuff. And I think there's a lot of power in that, right? To sort of find your own specific community. Even stuff like Tumblr, right, was kind of like this, where really, really, really like niche down. You had these really individual niche communities. I think where we ended up in the kind of like next era of the internet is this very algorithm driven social media landscape where the sort of biggest players have done a ton of consolidation. Everybody's on TikTok, everybody's on Instagram, everybody's on whatever. I'm assuming people are still on Facebook. I'm not, but I know people are, right? So it's like, you got to have your thing. But that did a few things. Like, one, it really stripped away the amount of control you had over your own online presence in terms of there is no like script kiddie version of Instagram. Like, you can't really trick out your Instagram profile in that kind of way, right? You don't have the control over it the way you have control over. Secondly, the thing that ends up getting your stuff found is not recommendations from like-minded people. It is the algorithm rewarding you by showing you to more people. And so you have this kind of like very, to me, seemingly very bizarre phenomenon of someone will make essentially what is the same video 100 times, right? Like it's like same girl doing the same pose and the same, but she's a slightly different background to do this, to do this, to this. Or like a picture, like a video of like somebody like walking down an aisle and like picking out like an iPhone charger. And there's like 7 different versions of this. So it's like, well, the
They're all
reason they're
trying to
doing that
game
is
the
like yeah,
algorithm, right?
exactly. Right. Like
Yeah.
one of those went extremely viral, right? And they're
Yeah.
trying to find the kind of secret sauce. But ultimately, it's this very alienated, disconnected thing. You're not ever thinking about who's the person on the other end of that. This is like the not to get like too far afield, but like Jacques Lacan, who's like the French, very famous French psychoanalyst, post Freudian, sort of post structuralist psychoanalyst. You always talk about this idea of the big other, and the big other is this like abstract idea of the societal other, this like other being that's like watching you, this thing that's supposed to know that you kind of act in service to, right? And that's very much what like the algorithmic internet is. It's like, I want the not other people. I have to think about what the algorithm will reward from me. And ultimately, it's unknowable and completely mysterious. And you kind of find yourself acting out these little rituals to try to get its behavior. I think as AI enters into that. So, for example, I don't know about you guys. Like, I am a Google Ads marketer. I market on Google Ads. I don't use Google. Why don't I use Google? Well, I didn't use Google because one, it was bad enough when like SEO websites were like the top 10 things for anything you wanted to, like, if you're like, how do I find the key in The Legend of Zelda or whatever? It's like, you're going to get the world's worst written article that's purely gaming a specific algorithm to try to rank in that place. And maybe you get to the thing after you scroll through 17 ads that have like the tiny little X or whatever. Right now, the way we kind of chosen to use AI, which is very kind of typical of human beings. It's like, hey, you have access to this like super intelligence that can do anything. It's like, great. I wanted to make 1 million of these SEO web pages and just 1 million of these because that's how I'm going to get the ad revenue. And that's how it's so I kind of see the web as being this thing that, again, I relied on as a kid to like expose me to things, it made me who I am. I see it just getting eaten from the inside out by kind of AI content in a way that like I just could not care less about. And I think in many ways we're gonna see that on the video side. I think you see beginnings of that now, but yeah, it's just so I look at that and I say like, if the thing that made the internet special was it enabled human connection, what we're headed towards is a period where we are connected not to other people, but connected to the internet itself, right? As a
Very
sort of
meta.
yeah, and so I don't know what that means, and I don't know if that continues. In some ways, I see younger people being very skeptical of the internet and very skeptical of phones and very skeptical of social media, and I think they feel a sort of profound sense of unease that I think maybe we do something different as a society. But I do worry about a lot of that stuff. I worry about what we lose. Obviously, we gain a ton. I use AI every day. Like I'm not an AI skeptic by any means, but any tool is only as good as what you use it at for, right? You can use a gun to kill a deer and feed your family, and you can use a gun to kill a person. So it's ultimately comes down to how we use these incredibly powerful tools and whether it ends up being a net benefit for society or not. So that was a long rambling answer. I'm sorry I really went off there.
No, I think what is becoming clear to me from our last conversation, even through the different threads that you took us through, is it sounds like authenticity um, is a core value of yours, Dan. And then let me know if that resonates at all, right? Because when you shared this historical context of where the internet was, it kind of had this spontaneous kind of not pop culture, but like this this naturally forming culture where you could be discovered, and there's a bit of luck, a bit of happenstance, but what remained true is the human connection piece, which ties back to authenticity. And I guess, instead of going down this theoretical lane, just to wrap up here, what I'm gathering is like, is there a way to continue the advance of AI in a way that still maintains human connection in an authentic way?
I think there is. I think there is. I think, yeah, it's interesting, right? Like any tool can be used to help or hurt. I think part of our problem is I think we've consistently undervalued human connection in our move into like our current sort of technological ecosystem, right? And I think we have kind of consistently optimized for ways to remove the human from the system. And as an automator, right, as someone who automates systems all the time, right, the fewer humans I can have in the system, the more consistent the system tends to become. Not always, but often, right? But as you know, Nassim Taleb's written about this, like if you ever read like Anti-Fragile or whatever, but it's like this idea of like just because a system is more consistent doesn't mean it's actually more robust. And what humans in the loop and humans in the system actually give a system is the ability to adapt to unexpected circumstances, right? And to adapt in a way that aligns with, human values and so on. So I think there is a sort of path that we're on that I think is probably not great for us with AI, right? And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't think it's like tech people are bad and they're doing blah blah blah. It's not like that, right? It's more of a tragedy, the common scenario where we have to be really deliberate about the kinds of cultures we build. And my hope for AI, like my sort of like best case scenario for AI is that AI expands so rapidly and gets so good that it creates enough of a surplus of value that we can actually, as a culture, take a minute and be like, okay, well, now that we're all fed, maybe we should take a minute and be like, there were some things I liked about, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if you guys ever had this experience. Have you ever like have someone that like goes to Italy for a week and they come back and they're like, oh my God. Like as it turns out, you can chill out a little bit and everything's still okay. And they're like, coffee's great. Everyone's like a little more relaxed, right? It's like a different piece of life. And like, particularly people from the States, they get so used to this pace of life that we're all a part of. I'm certainly a part of. My hope is that like AI produces so much surplus value that we're like, hey, maybe we can just chill out a little bit and we can think about like, hey, maybe we want parks after all. Or you know what I mean? Like maybe I should like go out and meet someone. I don't know, man. I think it could go either way, but I think this is the reason that's important for like people like you, people like Moses, right? People in your listenership to really think about the tools that they're using consciously and think about like what is the end result, right? Like I started an AI SEO thing and I put a bullet in it because I was like, what am I doing? Like I don't even want to do this. I'm not producing stuff that like I have people actually want to read. I'm producing stuff that's meant to generate leads for one way or the other. There's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with that as a business model or whatever, particularly if your material is producing value for the people that read it. But mine wasn't, right? So I was just like, hey, like maybe I should like use this tool for something that's actually going to make the people around me better, the community around me better, the world around me better.
Let's talk about that, Dan. I
Yeah.
think that's a good segue into what you're doing now, and maybe you can share a little bit of, how you're leveraging AI today in your business for good, for business. Like, tell us more there.
I think one of the most underrated uses of AI is to actively argue against your conclusions in anything, right? So, my sort of favorite use of AI, like just as a bit of background, the Google Ads management sort of industry is in a very weird place. It's in a very complex place. Sort of mechanisms that determine the auction that is Google Ads are very hard to parse. Google's antitrust lawsuit sort of laid bare they have a lot of bad practices, right? And just illegal practices as far as I'm concerned. So it's kind of like this game where you're doing stuff and it's very hard to tell what really impacts the client and whether your ideas are really the best one. And you are making decisions under uncertainty the vast majority. And so what I find AI to be incredibly good at is I will sit and I will compose an argument. I will write down an argument. I will say, here's my data. Here is my reasoning. I think this is going on inside this account, this. And then I essentially just dump that into a variety of different, you could do straight into ChatGPT o3. O3 Pro is kind of overkill for it, but O3 works great. I built a couple different tools just in stuff like relevance.ai or whatever, where it's parses it through several different LLMs. And I'm just like, argue against this, or are, or like, what did I miss? Like, what, here are a list of my cognitive biases, spot them. Like, just somebody who sits over your shoulder and says, you are making the same mistake you always make. In fact, I have a little AI automation where every week I do a weekly journal. And so we're review of the week, and I dump it. I just copy paste it when I'm done it into this automation, and it feeds it through ChatGPT. And it's like, here's a list of the top 10 mistakes that I make over and over and over again. It's like, I asked my wife, I asked my mom, I asked my friends. I was like, here are the top 10 mistakes. Dan does too much. He tries to add new projects where he should remove them, right? Like, there's whatever. He makes things overly complex, like all the things. And I'm like, look through the journal and tell me where I'm making these 10 mistakes. And it's just that kind of sort of red teaming idea is so valuable. It's so intensely valuable because you don't have to listen to it. It's not always right. In fact, many times it's wrong, but it's never going to, if you really tell it to be rough on you, it will. And that's hard to get with people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Particularly when there's a power dynamic involved in a company. So that's my go-to is just tell me where I'm being dumb. And it's like, "Oh, I'll tell you. I will definitely tell you." And I'm like, awesome." You know what I mean? So that works out quite well.
That's an incredible use case. Red teaming to that level of depth. I think when I think about creating automated workflows, I'm always thinking about it from a client perspective. It sounds like you've done it to level up yourself and level up your thinking and to be able to provide this different perspectives because I think oftentimes we're just so stuck in our ways. We're blind to how others view us or how others might perceive us, or even we could just be blind. We have blind spots. I think what you're saying is we can leverage AI to help us call those spots out more apparently and just confront it, right?
Yeah. I mean, it really shifted my point of view. We certainly use it for client, like our client reporting is run through ChatGPT, right? Like, so it will, will take in a very brief sort of manager report. We'll feed that through it, the data, get that into a really nicely written thing that explains all the terminology. So we do all that stuff for clients, right? But it really shifted my mindset when I realized essentially if you're a technical marketer like I am, essentially what people are paying me for is decision making over time. Like that's what I do. That's all I do. The button pushing in the ads is the easiest part of what I do, and it's probably the fastest thing that's gonna be automated, right? Like, you've got to assume that Google is trying to get Gemini to be a fully autonomous agent inside Google Ads. Like, I
Sure.
fully expect that to be a thing in the next few years, right?
Mm.
If not sooner. But the reason people pay me particularly is like, I've been doing the same thing for over a decade with the same type of client. I've seen every single thing. I've got pattern recognition that it's really hard to get otherwise. So once you realize that like decision making is the core product you're selling, then it's like, well, what are all the best principles of decision making and how do I constantly do them? Like actually do them? Because we all know like sunk cost fallacy. Like, well, got it. But we all got it, right? But there's actually a fallacy where it's like you think that knowing about a cognitive fallacy
Mhm.
will help you avoid it. It doesn't. It actually makes it worse because you're like, well, I totally know about sunk cost fallacy. And then you just do it more rather than less. So, like, just having an automated thing that says, hey, here are all the common problems that people have. And I want to suggest that you might be having these problems in these particular ways, particularly as context windows get longer and sort of AI memory gets longer. I mean, it's real creepy. ChatGPT is the one I rely on the most. It's really creepy for it'll be like, like last week, it was like, have you considered asking Jason about this? And I was like, how do you even know who Jason? Like, how do I know Jason? Right? It's like, not you, Jason, a different Jason.
Yeah.
And but it's like, it knows stuff about me that I forgot that I told it. And it'll be like, this is just like when you were dating Kate. Remember that? And I was like, dang, dude. Yeah, you're right. This is just like when I was dating Kate. So it's like, it is a very powerful tool for that. I think the danger is such a temptation to do the other way around, where you say, here's all my stuff. Tell me what you think. And then I'm going to read it. And then I'm going to sort of red team ChatGPT. And I think it does not work the other way around. Like, our cognitive biases work where the moment we get anchored or primed to a particular interpretation, we are operating from that as like the sort of baseline. And that's a fundamental skewing of your reasoning that I think is super dangerous. But giving it your thinking that you did on your own and saying, tear this apart, make this better, like steel man this argument is another really amazing one. Like, make this the best possible version of this argument that I'm making. That's such a level up. It's an easy 10-point add to your IQ score as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
I think everybody
I
should
love
be doing it.
that.
It doesn't matter if you're in business or not. You should just be using it.
Yeah, I love the practicality of that, Dan. And for our audience, a lot of the listeners are founders, business owners, people running companies. One of the things that we hear often is like, "Hey, Jason, Moses, we want to do AI, we just don't know where to start." It seems like there's friction, whether it's a team, it's education, intimidation. Where do you typically start, and how do you get people over the hurdle and to the other side and see the light and create this wow moment?
Yeah. I think it depends a little bit on where people are starting. I've had people start in the for example, I had someone on my team who I kept being like, "You gotta try to use AI for this." And she was like, "I use this, it's not very good." And I watched her use it and I realized she was just Googling things inside ChatGPT. So she would like go into ChatGPT and she'd be like, WordPress form tutorial. And I was like, that's not how this works. So sometimes it's just a skill issue, right? It's a different paradigm of software. It's a different paradigm for like how you use it. It's the first software where if you don't like what you got out of it, you could just keep telling it to give you something else and it will. Right. So that's different. Right. There are other people who are, like you said, intimidated by it. And I go, I am very honest with my team where I'm like, I fully expect, I mean, I'm one of these people where my percentage likelihood of a better than any human sort of AGI type scenario is pretty high in the next like 10 years or so. So I'm like, look, we're regardless of whether you like it or not, we're probably going to live in a world where an AI is better than you at anything you ever want to do. But there's not going to be anything left for us to do. So like I don't think that necessarily means there's not gonna be anything for us to do because AI is expensive. It'll probably still be expensive, whatever. But I think it behooves you to learn it. So I tend to lean into like hey, like we might all be extinct soon. You should probably learn this stuff so you know what's going on.
Probably sooner than 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm like, look, the timeline's like it's either one or the other, right? So I mean, I think that and that's a little bit tongue in cheek, but not really, right? Like I'm an AI safety person. I think AI safety legislation and policy is incredibly important. I push AI safety stuff on everybody I know. I haven't quite like withdrawn all my life savings. I'm not moving to a farm upstate or whatever to hide underground, but it's a thing that's on my mind and I try to put it in other people's minds as well. But I think the other thing is like once you show people the capacity for take the thing you hate the most and let's work on that. And once you see what it helps you with there, I think that unlocks it for people. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's usually the thing. It's like, just tell me the thing you hate the most. It's not necessarily like the thing that's the constraint, the things that's like the biggest pain in the butt, the thing that's the biggest move the needle. It's like, what's the thing that you just every time it happens, you're like, oh God,
Get it off my plate, right?
they did get it off my plate, right? And it's like, great. So it's like for me, it was writing reports. So now it's like I have like whisper flow on my computer. You hit tap tap. I just talk about what I'm seeing in the account. That goes into a Google form. I hit submit. That sends that through ChatGPT, turns it into a fully written report that's like super great, pulls in their stuff. And like that saves me hours a week. And it's so much more fun to do.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
I love that. Well, so, as we round out the last couple minutes here, Dan, this has been great. We took um, a journey through your background and talked a little bit about where AI is going. And, that lands us to, these rapid fire questions that just to close us out. So, what's your favorite AI tool or resource that you can't live without or that you use on a day-to-day basis?
I mean, I guess I would have to say like ChatGPT because if I could only keep one, that's what I would keep because it's like the most versatile. But that's a boring answer, so I'll try to think of something more fun. I use Cursor for Google Ads script creation is magic. It is a magic miracle. It's like if you work in Google Ads and you're not a coder, like I'm not particularly, I have some programming experience, but very, very little. Scripting used to take forever. And so to now to just to use cursors, primarily what I use to say, hey, I would love a Google script that produces this kind of report and makes a sheet and can do this and can do that. And to have that only be one or two iterations because it's a relatively simple programming language is magic. It has unlocked a whole suite of potential automations for us that just wouldn't have been possible otherwise. And that is absolutely amazing. Whisper Flow too for like voice to text dictation in
Love
any app
Whisperflow. Yeah.
is excellent. Yeah, super. So it's those are two of my favorite. I know I said three. You don't ask for one. I said three. I cheated. I'm a cheat, and I'm okay with that. That's all right.
You mentioned that, I guess number one piece of advice for leaders who want to adopt AI, you mentioned figure out something that you hate doing. Is there anything else that you might suggest there?
I'd say the number one sort of thing for people who are if it's owners or founders, anybody, right? If you are using I think particularly if you're an old person like me, I'm old. Okay, so I'm old. The biggest hurdle to get over it is the idea that the output is variable, and so
Yes.
this is a thing that I see over and over where people will do some kind of prompt or whatever. They don't like what they get, and they say AI is bad at this. And it's like that first pass, it's just one of many, and you can say, "Make it a little bit more like this, make it a little bit more like that, make it a little bit more like this. Now change the prompt to match the output that we just got to," right? It's an evolutionary process, much more like working with an animal than it is working with a machine. And once you get that, right, it's a very different process of like it's much more like collaboration more than anything else. So that's always the big thing I tell people is like, if you're having trouble figuring out what the utility is, like tell it what you want it to be and like keep coaching it and it'll get there. So it's an interesting
That
paradigm shift.
that point you bring up is so good because sometimes we talk to clients and they're like or they wanna give up on AI. They're like, "It doesn't work." And I think there's a knowledge gap there because AI is not deterministic, right? It's just every time you might even though it's the same prompt, the output is gonna keep changing, you know?
Yeah, it's just like a person, right? It's much more like a person. Like people make mistakes, AI makes mistakes, right?
Yeah.
I can't remember where I read this. This is not my thing. So credit where credit's due, but someone said you could think of AI like a really, really smart intern that's also high on ketamine. And that's stuck in my head ever since. I was like, yeah, that's pretty accurate. Like it just every now and then you're like, what? Never mind. It's fine. Just
Yeah,
I'll
yeah, yeah.
coach you right. So yeah, have that in mind and it'll work out for you.
Amazing. Last, question to close this out. What does scaling freedom mean to you, Dan?
It's an interesting question, guy. I think I'm headed into like a different period of my life where I'm still driven by work quite a bit, but I find myself more focused on I don't want to say like legacy projects, but really thinking about like, okay, cool. Like let's say I'm halfway through my life. When I die, what do I want to look back on and say, I'm glad I worked on that, right? Like as Google ads, like I love managing Google ads, right? So I have nothing wrong with it. But I don't think when I die, I'm gonna be like, I'm so glad I built that marketing agency. You know what I mean? Maybe I will, maybe I won't, right? So for me, scaling freedom is all about when it comes down to allocating your time. Do you allocate your time according to your values or do you allocate your time based on what people are demanding of you? That's what it comes down to. You could work all day every day on your business if that's where your values lie. That's where your desire points, right? That's an expression of who you are as a person. If you're doing it because you're like you have bills to pay or because your clients are mad at you or whatever, and we all go through those phases, right? That's not really an expression of who you are and an expression of the context that you find yourself enmeshed in. And it's not really a function of freedom, right? And so you could be a founder, you could be a CEO, you could be incredibly rich and powerful. Like, I don't think people like Elon Musk are free in that sense, right? If anything, they have more sort of ties to the rest of the world than we do. And so for me, it's thinking about it in that case, like when I sit down and I think about what I want to do every day, do I do the thing that aligns with my values? Can I make that choice? Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you got to pay the bills, right? I got to feed my kids, right? but am I making that values-based choice as much as humanly possible? And anything that helps you move in that direction, if it's automating, if it's AI or whatever, I think that is a good for humanity. It's a good for human beings, right? As long as you use it to move you in that direction and not just down the path of, I'm going to work more to work more to work more, right? So that's what that means to me.
Yeah, holy cow. That really resonated. It really hit home. I had shivers down my spine just hearing that answer. I think this is a good place to pause. And thank you so much for joining us. And for our listeners who want to connect with you offline, where can they go see your next show? Where can they find out more about your music career as well as your Dan Barrett AI marketing agency as well?
Yeah. So the agency is at AdWordsNerds.com. You can go there and check us out. I write a blog called Better Questions, which is at betterquestions.co. I've kind of actually slowed down the pace a little bit there, but I do write there whenever I write, and that's kind of where I send people who want to learn more about me. But you can on Instagram, you can find the band. It's Have a Nice Life Band. You can find us on Instagram or Spotify or YouTube or wherever you find your stuff. We'll be on there. The band's called Have a Nice Life, and you can check us out there.
Sweet. So that wraps up another episode of Scaling Freedom. We just scratched the surface of the best insights from Dan and from others. Thank you for sharing your valuable experience. And remember to subscribe and follow ScalingFreedom.ai for more practical strategies on how to navigate AI in your organization.